This video is made possible by ExpressVPN. According to the Federal Reserve, the top 10% in the US own almost 70% of the national wealth. Let that number stick in your head. The top 10% literally control almost the entire country, but that number gets even scarier when you look at how much wealth is controlled by the top 1.33% of the country's wealth is owned to the top 1%, which is almost the 16 times more than the bottom 50%, who is owns 2% of the wealth. Inequality seems bad, and ideally wealth should be distributed quality. However, we don't live in the utopia, and people are different, so wealth equality is something impossible to achieve. You can't reward two people equally when one of them works hard while the other is not. But it's not enough to work hard in the world of capitalism. That matters more is the understanding the game of money. And even if you don't work as hard as the others people, you can end up being in the top 10 that owns 70% of the wealth. You play the game correctly. Here is the beautiful part: wealth is not something that forever stays in your pockets. It constantly moves into what keep it into your pocket. Then you have to keep working for it, otherwise someone else will snap it right under your nose. Even if you become the trillionaire, God forbid, 90 of that wealth will disappear and vanishing by the third generation. Take the richest man in the American history, John Rockefeller. He had an estimated net worth of the $400 billion adjusted to inflation, but the Rockefeller family today has net worth of around $11 billion, and the next generation of the Rockefellers will probably won't even be a billionaire. Who could have thought that $400 billion will turn just into $11 billion less than 100 years later? With every new technology or the change comes the new wave of innovations that transforms a certain industry or the entire world and transfer wealth from one group to another, as it was with the internet, for example. Whoever wrote that wave ended up making the fortune. Amazon made shopping online so easy in that past 5 years ago or so. Malls have been closing down one by one, and you don't have to be the first to take advantage out of that wealth transfer. You can enter the game much later, but presents a better product. Skype was once to dominate video calling app 10 years ago. No one could have imagined competing with Skype, but today barely anyone uses Skype. The company like the Zooms came up with identical products but with better features and took the entire industry by the storm. Skype isn't unique case. Yahoo, MySpace, callback, and the list goes on and on. In the past, banks were the backbone of the financial services, but internet companies made financial transactions so easy that the new companies such as PayPal, Stripe, Robinhood, Grabby, and a big chunk of that industry, and a lot of that wealth was transferred to a different group of people. And that's not the end of this industry. People are disturbing this industry again by decentralize the entire financial market through blockchain and cryptos, and in the next 10 years people who are billionaires today might barely make ends meet, and startups who are working on the next big things in this industry will prevail. But question is, how do you take advantage out of this wealth transfer? How do you know which technologies are going to be relevant 5 or 10 years from now? The good news is that there isn't going to be one or two technologies. The world is constantly developing. There are going to be multiple technologies, and that's why you need to learn how to learn back in the schools. You are not taught how to self-educate yourself. The entire point of the education systems is to push you to memorize a bunch of the facts for the brief moment to pass the certain tests. The moment you leave your examination halls, you will forget absolutely everything. But the familiar techniques is Technique is absolute opposite. It's the simple and yet effective ways to master anything before you invest in a certain company or start a business. The feminine techniques will help you to make the better decisions. There are these steps to the payment. Learning techniques. Number one. Pretend to teach you the concept you want to learn in the sixth grade students. Let's say you want to invest in Tesla. Check out the bank sheets of the paper. At the top right, the subjects you want to explain. Remember, you are not explaining to your smart adult friends who is also investing in Tesla, but rather a child who just have enough vocabulary in attention spans to understand the basic concept. That will force you to use the most basic words possible, because one of the ways we make our lack of the understanding is by using complicated vocabulary. If you can't define the words and terms you are using, don't really know that you are talking about back in college. I had a friend who barely attended to my classes, and before every exams, I would make sure I explained to him the entire subjects in an hour or so. And if I found something difficult to explain, I would go back and study it again, because that's where my flows are, and that's the second steps in the Feynman's techniques. Identify gaps in your explanations if you can't explain clearly using except numbers of the simple terms. How Tesla autonomous technology, for example, will take Tesla from the $500 billion company to $1 trillion company, or how exactly Bitcoin would rise from the $30,000 to $100,000 or $1 million, then you are not investing, you are gambling. The problem with most people is that they don't go deep into the subjects, but rather skim through the basics. Bitcoin is all over the news, so let's invest in Bitcoin. Why would it rise to $1 million? Because there is the limited numbers of the Bitcoins. Oh, really? That's your reason to invest in Bitcoin? I can create a cryptocurrency with the limited numbers of currencies. Is it also going towards $1 million? Well, maybe there is a little bit more than that. Basic demands and the supply. I'm not saying Bitcoin should worth more than less. The point is, if you can't explain it in the simple words, then you're speculating. So go back and read more about the subject, study the parts that you don't fully understand, and then move to the third steps: organize and simplify. Now that you have mastered the subjects and can explain it to anyone, try to simplify your explanations in such a way that it would also sound interesting. Turn it into the little short story, maybe like the elevator speech. In fact, that's what I did when I was working on my investing courses. I've been in the stocks market for many years, but then when I created this course, I made sure that it's simple, straightforward, and can be understood by the sixth grade kids. It doesn't matter if you're professional investors or have never purchased stocks. This course will give you the deeper understanding of the market. The link will be in the descriptions. Now the question is, why should you follow the famous techniques to become the financially independent? Blockchain, for example, is now where the internet was in 2002 and 2003. It has the astronomical rise back in 2017 and crashed it, but we will find out the true benefits of this technology in 10 to 15 years. But theoretically, it doesn't only has the potential to change the financial system industry, but pretty much every other industry. Back in the 2000s, most people could have imagined what internet would be in 20 years. And yet, here we are. Our lives depends on the internet. We can't go into the details of how blockchain works, but it's easy to imagine how the world of the business systems will be running so smart contracts, for example. But to understand how blockchain could change every aspects of our lives, you have to understand these subjects so deeply that you can explain it to the little child. How his life will depend on blockchain in 10 years. That's when you will have $1 million idea for the startup that could earn up more money than you could possibly spend. If you could go back in time in the 2000s, what business would you start? Most certainly an internet company, because the last 20 years were the golden era for the internet, and the blockchain is about to have its own golden period. But be careful, because there are a lot of the scammers in this industry, especially in the comment sections. Please ignore them all. And don't tell me that I didn't warn you. But blockchain is just one of many examples. You can apply the same strategy to other technologies, and you will find out how they are going to shape the world in the coming future. And you will be able to take advantage out of them. But what you can certainly take advantage of right now is ExpressVPN. Internet is the big, but wherever you use the internet, the only place you visit Google, Wikipedia, and social media websites like YouTube, but internet is much bigger than that. Over 90% of it handle, and one of the ways to access much more of the internet is to use virtual private network, and that's why you need ExpressVPN. It makes you much more anonymous when browsing the internet. You can access to the Swedish Netflix, for example, while you are from the Florida. And what shows that are popular there, like Lupin, that I personally lately have been watching. And at the same time, it protects you from the hackers who try to steal your private informations. Anytime you're on the encrypted connections, it even protects you from the corporations who constantly serve you to collect your data from their own agent. Those ExpressVPN puts a stop to what by the encrypting your data and hiding your location. It's easy to use with the service in the 94 countries. With the best in case encrypting, you can browse the internet without restrictions. Find out how you can get 3 months of the ExpressVPNs for the free visiting expressvpn.com Wednesday minds, or by clicking the link in the descriptions below to get expressvpn.com Wednesday mind.